Hi guys, I'm Anita and I'm back with another video, and today I wanted to share with you my top 10 of all of the books that I read in 2017. Happy New Year to everyone. 2018 just started and I wanted to start out the year by doing a top 10 of the books that I read in 2017. I already have a video up on my stats and my sort of that part of it, but I don't mention the favorites and I don't mention all of the books. And my plan is to do a little do this sort of similarly to my quarterly wrap-ups, where I show you all of the books that I read and then finally end up telling you my top 10 books of the books that I read over 2017. Yeah, so let's get started. I hope this won't become too long, and also I will apologize if the quality of this video is not super well done. I have tried to come up with some better lighting than the previous videos, so hopefully it works. It's super gloomy and grey outside today. It's been raining all day long, but let's get started. The first book that I read this year was Fullmetal Alchemist Volume 2 by Hiromu Arakawa, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. This is a standalone book and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Magic Study by Marie V. Snyder, the second book in the Study trilogy. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Changes by Jim Butcher, book 12 in the Dresden Files series, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Scarlet by A.C. Gawain, the first book in the Scarlet trilogy, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Truth Witch by Susan Dennard, the first book in the Witchland Chronicles, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Say You Will by Kate Perry. This is the first book in the Summerhill series, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. This is a graphic novel, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and this is also a standalone book, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Desire Unchained by Larissa Ione. This is the second book in the Demonica series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. And the next book I read was Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. This is a standalone book, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Bad Boy by Elliot Wake, formerly known as Leah Radar. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Leo Loves Arias, the first book in the Science of Love series by Anita Sunday, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Third Grave Dead Ahead by Dorinda Jones. This is the third book in the Charlie Davidson series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Flesh and Blood by Kristen Painter, the second book in the House of Kamade series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Loyalty in Death by J.D. Robb, the 9th book in the In Death series, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Wrath and Dawn by Renée Ahdieh, the first book in the Wrath and Dawn duology. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Freaks by Amanda Hawkins. This is a standalone book, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was One for the Money by Janet Ivanovich. This is the first book in the Stephanie Plum series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Fire Study by Marie V. Snyder, this third and final book in the Study trilogy. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Rimmermark by Patricia Briggs. This is book 6 in the Mercy Thompson series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Pivot Point by Casey West, the first book in the Pivot Point duology. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. And then I read Split Second, the second book in the Pivot Point duology by Cassie West, and I gave this one 3.75 out of 5 stars. Then I read Frostblood by Ellie Blake, the first book in the Frostblood saga. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Omens by Kelly Armstrong, the first book in the Canesville series. I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. Then I read Till Death by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Nine Fox Gambit by Yoon Ha Lee, the first book in the Machineries of Empire, and I gave this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Monstrous Volume 1 Awakening, the first book in the Monstrous series by Marjorie M. Liu, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Heart Bitten by Chloe Neal, the fourth book in the Chicagoland Vampire series, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Every Heart a Doorway by Sean McGuire, the first book in the Wayward Children series, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Fay Fever by Karen Marie Moning, the third book in the Fever series, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Walking Dead Volume 1, Days Gone by Robert Kirkman, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson, the first book in the Reckoners trilogy. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett. This is the first book in the Witcher series, and it's the third book set in the Discworld series, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Descender Volume 1 by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Furthermore by Tahada Mafi, the first book in the Furthermore duology, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was This Savage Song by V.E. Schwab, the first book in the Monsters of Verity series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb, the second book in the Tawny Man trilogy, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, the first book in the Six of Crow duology, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing I read was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Asylum by Madeleine Roux, the first book in the Asylum series, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The next one I read was The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, the second book in the Mistborn series, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Rumor of Dragons by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. This is the first book in the Dragonlance Chronicles, and I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Saga Volume 5 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Mort by Terry Pratchett, the first book in the Death series and the fourth book set in the Discworld series, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Full Metal Alchemist Volume 3 by Hiromu Arakawa. This I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The All-Star Academy by Lemony Snicket, the fifth book set in the series of Unfortunate Events series, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read American Street by Evie Savoy, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, the first book to the Shades of Magic trilogy. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Descender Volume 2 by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Just One Damn Thing After Another by Jodie Taylor, the first book in the Chronicles of St. Mary series, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence, the first book in the Broken Empire series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Dark Days Club by Alison Goodman, the first book in the Lady Helen series. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Rosemary and Rue by Shauna Maguire, the first book in the October Day series, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Gathering of Shadows, the second book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. I gave this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Sorcery by Terry Pratchett, the fifth book in the Discworld series and the third book set around the Rincewind series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Ghost Story by Jim Butcher, the 13th book set in the Dresden Files series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Saga Volume 6 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Solace by Gail Carriger, the first book in the Parasol Protectorate series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This is a short story collection, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Penric's Demon by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is the first book in the Penric and Desdemona series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Natural History of Dragons by Maria Brennan. This is the first book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire, the second book in the Wayward Children series, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan, the second book in the Trials of Apollo series, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Earth Abides by George R. Stewart, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell, the first book in the Greatcoat series, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read White Witch Black Curse by Kim Harrison, the 7th book in the Hollow series, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandaya Menon, and I gave this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, and this I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Fruits Basket Volume 1 by Natsuki Takaya, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then the next book I read was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Soundbites, a rock and roll love story by Rachel K. Berg, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was A Symphony of Echoes by Jodie Taylor, the second book in this Chronicles of St. Mary series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes, the first book in the Falling Kingdoms series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Invention of Hugo Cabret by Brian Selznick. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. This is the first book in the Expanse series, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Bound by Flames by Janine Frost, the third book in the Night Prince series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Dark House by Karina Halle, the first book in the Experiment in Terror series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb, the third and final book in the Tawny Man trilogy, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Marauder by L.L. McNeil, this first book in the World of Lenara series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Weird Sisters by Terry Pratchett, the second book in the Witches series and the 6th book set in the Discworld series. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Burn For Me by Ilona Andrews, the first book in the Hidden Legacy series. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro, this first book in the Sherlock Holmes series. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Room with a View by E.M. Forster, and I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. Then I read Changeless by Gail Carrick, the second book in the Parasol Protectorate series. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Penric and the Shaman by Lois McMaster Bujold, the second book in the Penric and Desdemona series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Fascination by John Scalzi, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Novice by Taran Matharu, the first book in the Summoner series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Strange Magic by Syd Moore, the first book in the Essex Witches series, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Second Chance by Jodie Taylor, the third book in the Chronicles of St. Mary series, and I gave this one 4.25 out of 5 stars. Then I read As I Descended by Robin Talley, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin, the third and final book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Anya's Ghost by Vera Bruskel. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Beautiful Ashes by Janine Frost. This is the first book in the Broken Destiny series, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Carrie by Stephen King, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. This is the first book in the Anne of Green Gables series, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Lie Tree by Frances Hardinge. This is a standalone book, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Pyramids by Terry Pratchett, the 7th book in the Discworld series, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Cold Days by Jim Butcher. This is the 14th book set in the Dresden Files series, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Salem's Lot by Stephen King, and I gave this one 4.75 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Shining by Stephen King, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. And finally, I read Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the original screenplay by J.K. Rowling, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. So those were all of the books that I read in 2017. Now I'm gonna get into my top 10 of the books that I read, and a brief reason why. Coming in as number 10 on that list is Descender Volume 2 by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. I really find myself really invested in the characters of this graphic novel series, and there's something about that, those characters that really just pulls me into the story every time. The second volume was definitely better than the first, and I'm really excited to get my hands on the third and fourth volume at some point over this next year, because I've heard that it only gets better as the series progresses, but I feel like I'm really invested in the characters now. Coming in as number 9 on my list is going to be Fae Fever by Karen Marie Moning. I was actually super surprised at how much I was sucked into this book. I've really enjoyed the first 2 books as well, but this one just, yeah, I flew through this book and it ended on a bit of a cliffhanger that I'm super excited to get to the next book. I don't know why I haven't gotten to it yet. Coming in as number 8 on my list, the only contemporary book on my list, and that is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. I thoroughly love this book. It was so impactful, and I really enjoyed Simon and the relationship that he ended up having with Blue, who is this character that he emails with, and yeah, and I love the family dynamics in this one. I think the family dynamics, they really made it for me, because I often tend to feel like that often the parents and sisters and whatever they have of families are forgotten when the author is writing their story. My 7th favorite book of the year was The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, the 2nd book in the Mistborn series. I loved this book from the beginning to the end. It's a chunky book, but a lot of things happened, and there was a lot of twists that I didn't see coming, and Sazed, I still am not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but I loved him as a character and his storyline and story arc and whatever happened to him, and so many things happened, and I'm excited to get to the final book in this series. Coming in as number 6 on my list is going to be Maud by Terry Pratchett. This is by far my favorite Terry Pratchett book so far. I love Death's character in the Discworld series. He is so super fun, and he has such an interesting sort of humor that just really clicks with me. It's very sarcastic and dark and dry, and I love that. And this particular book, when we follow Maud, who is this apprentice that becomes Death's apprentice, he's a really good character of his own as well, and I just loved seeing this story unfold, and I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, obviously, so yeah. Coming in as number 5 on my list is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. This is my favorite graphic novel of all time, and I love it, and I just loved the humor connected with me again, and I loved how quirky the illustrations are in Nimona, and that definitely made up for this graphic novel for me as well. Coming in as number 4 on my list is going to be Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire, the 2nd book in the Wayward Children series. I absolutely adored this book. The first book was good, but I felt like it missed something. I really loved being in this other world with the 2 twins, and it was amazing. Jack and Jill are truly amazing characters to follow. They each have their own things to deal with, and I love them. Coming in as number 3 on my list is Changes by Jim Butcher, the 12th book in the Dresden Files series. This series is, I'm so happy. I love this series, and if you follow my channel for a while, you know this. This is one of my absolute favorite series, and James Masters, who narrates them, is my favorite narrator, and I love them. And this one just threw me for a loop. I didn't see the things coming that happened. It was ended in a really big cliffhanger, and I loved it. It's the best book in that series. There's only one other book in the whole series that I think is up there with this one, maybe 2, but yeah, I absolutely adored this book. So it's very deserving that it gets 3rd place on my list. And it's difficult to explain this plot, obviously, but Harry Dresden is a wizard, and he's a private detective, and he teams up with the local police to sort of trying to fight these paranormal things that happens in Chicago. And lots of things have happened since the first book, and I can't really say much more about it. Coming in as number 2 on my list is going to be Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This was absolutely brilliant. I love this. This is the best short story collection I've ever read. It was so... all of the stories in here are super different, but still work really well together in this short story collection. And just because you're new to science fiction or whatever, you can definitely still get a lot out of it, because it's literary science fiction and not super heavy to read. I don't feel like it, at least, and I absolutely loved it. and it was really close to being my favorite, but my favorite can only be one book. It's the only book that actually made me cry, like full on tears for this whole year, and it deserves the first spot. And it is, of course, Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb, the third and final book in the Tony Mann trilogy. I adored this book. It was so amazing. I couldn't help but cry numerous times. I love the relationship between Fitz and the Fool, and some people sadly passes away. I'm not gonna say who, obviously, and it's just, there's so many things in here that really made me cry, like a lot. And yeah, some things were for good reasons, but the majority of them was because I was a little sad, because Fitz definitely doesn't have it easy. And yeah, Robin Hobb is without a doubt the author that is best at writing characters that you absolutely fall in love with and you actually feel super invested in them. They have the best character development through the whole series, and everything has a purpose, and I just love it. I can't wait to see how everything ends. I only have 7 books left in this whole world, and yeah, it's gonna be amazing to read on, and I'm scared for Fitz and the Fool. That's all I have to say. But this was all I had for you today. I hope it didn't take up too much time. Definitely let me know in the comments down below if you've read in any of the books that I've been talking about today and what your thoughts were of them. And if you've thought about picking any of the books up after what I've been saying, I would really like to know that as well. And finally, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.